Hi, I'm Tim, and I'm going to be talking today about proteins and protein folding. So this is a protein. I'm not going to tell you which protein it is, but what I'd like to talk about today is the basic principles of chemistry that drive the folding of this amino acid sequence into a complex 3D shape. So we're going to start, first of all, with a definition of a protein. When you ask students what is a protein, you normally hear something about meat or hamburger. So they think of protein as something that you eat in your diet. And while that's true, that's not at all the concepts that we want to address when we talk about proteins. So for us, proteins are simply a linear sequence of amino acids that spontaneously fold up into a complex 3D shape like this, following basic principles of chemistry. So that's really what we want to try to cover in this short video. So first of all, basic principles of chemistry. What are those? So the first principle of chemistry we want to consider is polarity. And we're going to use the water kit, which has in it not only some models of water, but it has the basic principles of chemistry that you need to understand in order to understand how this protein folds up into a complex shape. So we start with water. These are magnetic water models. And the magnets that are in the water then represent the polar hydrogen bonds that allow every water molecule to interact with other water molecules. So this is called polarity. The water is polar. We always have to have at least two words describing things, so it's polar or hydrophilic. All right, so that's one principle of chemistry that's going to drive protein folding. So water, the reason water is polar is that there is an asymmetric distribution of negatively charged electrons around the three atoms, the two hydrogens and the oxygen that make up water. So electrons are negatively charged. They spend more time orbiting the oxygen atom than the hydrogen atoms, and therefore you develop a slight negative charge on the oxygen and a slight positive charge on the two hydrogens. So that's why the hydrogen of one water, which is slightly positive, can hydrogen bond with the oxygen of another, which is slightly negative. So that's polarity. That's a polar molecule. We have another molecule in the water cup. This is a hydrocarbon, ethane. And ethane is sort of the opposite of water in that ethane is nonpolar or hydrophobic. And what that means, or that results from the fact that the electrons that are contributed by all 8 of these atoms, 2 carbons, 6 hydrogens, these are symmetrically distributed around this molecule. So when faced with water, when you add oil to water or gasoline to water, they don't mix because there's no place on this nonpolar hydrocarbon where the polar water can interact with a slightly positive or slightly negative area on the surface of the molecule. Look what happens if I take one of these hydrogens off and I replace the hydrogen with a hydroxyl group. I've now converted what was originally ethane into ethanol, a primary alcohol. So now the question becomes, what is the chemical property of ethanol? If you mix ethanol with water, now suddenly you're going to find that those two solvents mix together very, very easily, very freely. Okay, so what we've done here is we've taken a hydrophobic hydrocarbon, we've added a polar functional group to it to make ethanol, and now we've changed the solubility properties of the hydrocarbon from being insoluble in water. Now the alcohol that derives from that is now soluble in water. Okay, so we have polar water, we have nonpolar or hydrophobic hydrocarbons, and then also in the water cup there are these two ions. Now an ion is a positively charged or negatively charged atom That is, if you take an atom and you gain or you lose one of the electrons, you'll be left with a positively charged sodium ion. If this chlorine gains one more electron than it deserves, it becomes a negatively charged chloride. So we have sodium chloride, an ion pair, and this is salt, and salt dissolves in water because now this positively charged ion will be hydrated. It will interact with the negatively charged oxygen of water. At the same time, the negatively charged chloride will interact with the partially positively charged hydrogen, and it dissolves these ions away from a lattice of sodium chloride. All right, so this is an electrostatic interaction between these two atoms. Okay, so that's one principle of chemistry that will become important as we consider protein folding. But the other thing I want you to be aware of is that these negative or positive charges interact easily with water. Okay? And you're going to see in just a second that these principles of chemistry are going to be applied now to the amino acids that make up a protein. So let's go back to the definition we gave initially of a protein. A protein is a linear sequence of amino acids that spontaneously fold up into a complex shape following principles of chemistry. We've done the principles of chemistry. Let's now do the amino acids.